Well, good morning. My name's Adam Hildebrandt, and I get to be one of the pastors here at Lawrenceville First, and it is such a joy to be with you this morning. In case you weren't here the last couple of weeks, I've been out of town. We got to go to Greece and to walk the footsteps of the Apostle Paul, and so such a privilege. Thank you for kind of giving Michelle and I the space to go and do that. It was an incredibly transformative trip, and I'll be talking a lot about that in the upcoming weeks and months and probably years. So thank you for the space to do that. I got to be honest, I didn't have this trip on our agenda or our schedule when we planned our preaching series for the year. And so when October came and we were going to do stewardship and talk about like what it is that we give to God, how we live, love, and give simply and intentionally, I was a little worried about going on this trip and not being here for 2 weeks of talking about stewardship. But I got to tell you, you got better sermons the last 2 weeks than you would have gotten from me. And so I'm so grateful for Deanne and for Alan and for their willingness to step up and step in, and just the way that they shared their heart so authentically. Like watching those in the middle of the night in Greece was fantastic. I loved it. I love the community of people and communicators that we have here at our church and the way that they love this church so well. So thank you to them. Thank you to you all, and looking forward to continuing this conversation. Just in case you wanted an update on Deanne did have back surgery on Tuesday, and she's doing well. She's still at the hospital. They hope to go home early this week, but she sends her love and know that she's joining us online, as many other people are. Hey, online friends, we're glad that you're with us wherever it is that you are today. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about this idea of simply living and loving and giving. That stewardship is a lot more simple than we make it, and we really are invited to do a few things, to live and love in the way of Jesus, and to give out of what God has given to us. And so we talked about living a life of worship and connection, that when we gather together, we're better because we're together. And when we gather in worship and we gather in small groups and different places and Sunday school classes, we're better and we grow and we need each other. And then we talked about how we love one another through humble service, both inside the walls and outside the walls of the church. And today we're going to talk about giving. And so I just want to be honest about that. We're going to talk about money, but oftentimes when somebody with a microphone like me in church stands up, it sounds like I want something from you. But really, what I want is something for you. I want you to win with money. But I don't want money to win you. Do you understand what I say when I say that? That I don't want money to have power in your life that it shouldn't have. And so I thought that we would take a little bit of different conversation. I've been doing stewardship talks on money and listening to stewardship talks on money for most of my life. And so I have never had a conversation like the one that we're going to have today around the psychology of money. And because I'm not that good at that, I thought I would bring in a special guest who is much better at that than I am. So I want you to welcome my friend Ashley Kwame. So I've known Ashley and Clayton and their children for a number of years now, and I'm so excited to have you with us and to just really have a conversation around how it is that we think about money and the power that money has in our lives. So you, Ashley, are a financial therapist, which I had never heard of before you. So tell me what that is and why that's an important thing.
Well, to be fair, I didn't know what a financial therapist was 5 years ago.
There we go.
So it is a newer development within the psychology field, and it makes a lot of sense when I thought about it or came to discover it, because money has meaning and emotions are tied to it. And so naturally, in being a therapist, that is kind of an area where I know a few things about. Yeah. I've studied. And so really that pursuit of becoming a financial therapist, you probably don't know this, but my husband is a financial planner. And so we have very interesting conversations around the dinner table. I
He has a massive spreadsheet. Like if you've
It's intense.
His budgeting spreadsheet, I've seen it. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
It is amazing if you're not his wife and financially inclined. Yes, it is quite impressive. But he and I nonetheless have some very interesting conversations. I specialize in the field of couples therapy, so all of my postgraduate training is in helping couples live and do better and create more meaning in their lives as it pertains to marriage. And so one of the conversations or topics that continue to come up is around money with couples. And I don't know, I see a lot of folks in here who are potentially coupled up, but I would imagine that if I did a show of hands, probably many of you would say, we've probably had arguments or fights maybe about money, or it's created some tension, yeah, and yeah, even in our relationship too. And so, in not knowing how to lead my couples in this particular area, I felt very incompetent. And like any good wife, I didn't go to my husband. He knows this.
So it's all good. It's all good.
He knows this. But I needed more than what he could offer, because I knew that there was something deeper. So I sought out further education, going back to graduate school, pursuing certification, really in this highly specialized area centering around emotions and money. So not just the numbers standpoint, but the emotion and meaning behind it.
Yeah, and like you said, when I talk to couples before they get married, there's always three things I tell them. The most important things you can do is work on communication, figure out your finances, and intimacy. Those three things. And finances seems to be kind of one of those that trips everybody up, because we have all of this baggage and all of these thoughts and all of these feelings around our finances. So how would you hope that people come to think about their finances in relationship to their mental and relational health?
My hope, and one of the things that I talk about, is that they see it as an area of their well-being. So there's some research out there that talks about the 8 dimensions of well-being, right? And we can probably name most of them, but the financial aspect is one of those areas of our well-being. And so one of the things that from the get-go that I like to talk about is that it's not just the numbers that we're struggling with. It's not the budget. It's not who spends, who saves, right? It's really what the meaning is and the emotion is in this dimension, and that we also have a relationship to it. It brings up certain thoughts, certain feelings. We have experiences with it long before we probably ever come to actually manage money, right? For many of you, I don't know, but I have memories of my parents arguing about it, or certain values that were instilled, like you work for money, right? You work hard for things. And so helping really people kind of get outside of this viewpoint that money is just tied to the numbers, because it's more than that. It's actually the emotional aspect, but our relationship and how we come to see it.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about kind of that relationship and that we have with money, and some of the misunderstandings and even some of the shame around money that we tend to carry.
I didn't realize that money causes shame, so I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I didn't until you said it, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh my, like we were having a conversation about this, and she's like, she said, a lot of people I talk to have shame around their lack of knowledge or their lack of understanding, or the fact that they don't feel like they have enough or are enough or can give enough. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I need to pay you for this therapy session?
Yeah, well, it's true, right? There's a direct kind of correlation there to money and our sense of enoughness. That's a made-up word.
I like it. We're going to use it.
Enoughness. But there's this correlation and relationship there to the money that we have, the money that we earn, the money that we save, the money that we spend, and it ties into how we feel about ourselves, our model of ourselves, the model of our relationship and our world. And shame can be an aspect of that if we don't do it well, if we feel like we're not doing it well in relation to our neighbor, right? If we feel like, oh, they're kicking it out, they're nailing it, right? They just, bought a new Tesla, like they seem to be able to do all these things, take a vacation. They must be knocking it out of the park. Why are we struggling? Why do we have such a hard time doing this? And shame can come up as an aspect of that. And like any person who experiences shame, our brains aren't really wired to want to feel that. I don't know if you know, I don't like to feel it.
No, I don't enjoy that.
I actively try to avoid feeling that. And most of us do, right? Because it's uncomfortable and it's difficult. And so when we experience that sense of shame, whether it's in relation to our money, our relationship, what have you, we develop certain strategies to cope with that. And some of us develop strategies of avoidance. Some of us maybe hyperfixate on it, like my husband Clayton, and we create really intense spreadsheets and then get excited and think that our wife is excited about it, and she's not.
I was
sorry.
also not that excited. Like there were more numbers on there than I cared to
I'm
deal
going
with.
to tell him this, and it's going to be very validating when I tell him this.
So in every relationship, there's a saver and a spender.
Correct.
And I am the spender in our relationship.
All right. Yeah.
So Michelle would enjoy a spreadsheet far more than I would.
Yeah, I'll let you and Clayton connect, on that aspect. But it can create a lot of shame. And so in that place of shame, our brains are naturally really designed to develop strategies or ways of working around that. And so one of those aspects can be avoidance. And that's typically what I see, right? Yeah. One partner maybe in the relationship is more of the avoider around money, and maybe one is more of the let's, try to fix this and, dial down on it. I saw somebody over here look to their partner there.
This is not a poking. We're not
right.
Don't look around, all right? Eyes forward. Eyes forward, people. So I want to read a little passage of scripture. Jesus, it turns out, says a whole lot of things about money. He spends about 25% of Jesus' parables are about money, which I think is a fascinating thing to see that Jesus talks about money so much. And I don't think it's because money is important to Jesus. I think it's because Jesus knows that money is important to us. And so Jesus wants us to know how to relate to that money. So in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus talks about it in this way. He says, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. In other words, like this kind of this hoarding mentality. Don't try to keep everything in control, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but instead store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consume and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Jesus is talking about attachment, right?
Yeah.
So unpack that, that attachment we have to money for us and just kind of why it has such a strong grip on us.
Whether it's money, whether it's physical possessions, attachment causes suffering, ultimately. Right? Our attachments to things can cause and bring us suffering. And I think one of the dangers of attachments, whether that is money, is that if we become very focused and fixated on that, how much money is in our account, that really we miss an opportunity to live in the present. Because that fear is so forward-focused, right? That attachment is so forward-focused. Yeah. And when we become so forward-focused, we miss out on what's going on in the here and now. The opportunities to give, the opportunities to serve, the opportunities to live and love.
That's good. So why do you think, if Jesus talks about money a whole lot, and in church we talk about Jesus and we talk about what Jesus talked about, why do you think it's so difficult for us to have meaningful conversations around money in the church?
Money is the one resource that touches every aspect of our life, if you think about it.
Yeah.
It is a part of every aspect of our life. There is a reliance and a dependency on it, right? We need it to survive, right? To purchase our food and our housing and, our clothing, what have you. And I think that sometimes, money can be, while it is a very important resource, I think we lose sight of what it can actually do for us. And as I said earlier, it really allows us the opportunity when we come off of autopilot and live intentionally, it allows us really the opportunity to live and to give and to be generous with our time and with our finances.
Love that. I love that. So Jesus kind of talks about this idea of these different ways of storing up treasures. It's almost as if the way that we think about money can affect the way that we think about God and our relationship with God. What would you have to say about that?
I come back to living a life well lived as being intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many of us would probably agree that we're probably likely very intentional with a lot of things in our life. I don't know about you.
Super intentional.
Super intentional.
Super
right?
intentional.
We try to be intentional in our parenting. We try to be intentional with our physical health. We try to be intentional with certain habits, if you will. But I think sometimes what I find a lot of couples neglect is being intentional with their resources, and money is a part of that. There's a saying that I'm probably going to get wrong here, but it's something to the effect of, if you don't tell your money where to go, it will tell you where to go. It will lead you. And you kind of alluded to this, I think, at the beginning, right? Yeah. Being intentional about telling your money where to go really allows you not only just to be generous in many ways, but allows you to live what I call a wealthy life. And that's not just from a numbers standpoint, but wealth from all of these areas of well-being. But it allows you to also, live when you look back, right? And we're, kind of at the pearly gates, if you will. It allows us to really look back and go, man, like that was a life well lived. Look at how intentional I was. Yeah. Now, I say that like it's so easy to do. Right? And I think you and I both know, along with many of you here, especially if you're in the throes of raising children, that being intentional with your time, being intentional with your mindset, with your mind, it is difficult, right? I was hoping for an amen. Yeah. But it is not easy to do, and it requires the time, it requires the space, the knowledge, the education. But for couples, it requires working together as a team. Mm-hmm. It requires sitting down and saying, let's have a hard conversation around this. Yeah. And that's not easy to do at all. And we don't want to do things that aren't easy. We want to do things that are easy. We don't want to do things that are hard. But I think in order to live up to, what God has called us to do, there's an aspect there that I think goes overlooked, and it requires us to be intentional with all of the aspects of our life.
So again, when somebody like me stands up here and we start talking about money, like everybody thinks, we got to get something, he's going to ask us for something, and really, like, it's that winning at life, that wealthy life. I call it the abundant life, that I really hope for people to live into, and to move beyond that shame and that guilt, and you talk about having kids. Like, we've got 3 kids, you've got 2 kids, and that child tax credit just doesn't quite cover all of their expenses.
No.
It seems that they're more expensive than that. And so on a monthly basis, when I hit that button to send my tithe to the church, I'm making a choice. And on some level, like, I'm choosing God's way over the other things that are pulling my attention. How is that act of giving, how is that act of intentionally doing what God asks me to do helpful for me?
Well, there's a psychological aspect to automation, and we're not going to talk about that.
Automate the important.
Right.
You can give online. I don't know if you know that. There's the internet.
But I
don't know how to do it, but it happens.
From a psychological standpoint, automation is our best friend, right? Yeah. But I also just said don't live on automation, right? I'm kind of contradicting myself here. But when it comes to the financial aspect of our lives, automation is our best friend, right? But I think also more than just automation, like, I think that, being able to recognize, but also not be afraid to kind of go into the waters of exploring what that meaning is behind money for you and for your coupleship. Yeah. Being able to look back and go, like this spending, and we're coming up on the holidays, so I'm aware that spending usually generally increases. Like, being able to look at, okay, this spending, it actually brings me joy. I like gift giving. I'm a gift giver personally, right? And that drives my husband crazy because it's usually not in the budget, right? Or the amount of giving that I would like to give is usually outside of the budget because it makes me feel good. But being able to look at what are the emotions like behind that, what is the meaning behind that, and really how does that link to my sense of self-worth? Mm-hmm. But also, for at least I'll speak personally here, what I feel like I'm called to do. Like, I feel like I'm called to give in this way, and I'm good at it. I'm actually really good at it. I'm really, really good, as Clayton would say. I'm really good at it. But I feel like that's where I'm called to do that. And, Clayton and I have had, on a personal side, just very honest conversations about that.
Yeah.
Spending gives him anxiety.
Yeah.
I don't know if it gives you anxiety, Michelle, but yeah, spending gives him anxiety.
It gives me zero anxiety.
It gives me zero, right?
Zero anxiety.
Yes, I'm with you.
If I could get on Amazon right now, I would.
Yeah. I was on there before we came on here, actually. Yeah. I didn't buy anything though, but I was browsing. But spending for him gives him anxiety. And when it comes to honoring God, I think one of the important things for couples is it's not just an individual. This isn't just an individual way of approaching money, of approaching honoring, God. This really is a couple way. It's a system. And so in order to make, that work, we have to both honor each other's emotions behind it. And that's hard to do sometimes. But when we can sit down intentionally as a couple and have that conversation, and I can learn and understand why it brings Clayton anxiety, or he can learn and understand why it brings me joy and pleasure, then we really can create one, a more realistic budget, but also like a wealthy marriage vision, one that centers around generosity, one that centers around intentionality, one that really centers around honoring God in the way that we feel we are called to do.
Yeah. Awesome. So there's a lot of research out there around gratitude and generosity and the connection of those two things. Talk to me a little bit about that. How does being a thankful person help me to be a generous person? Because the honest truth is nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I really want to be a greedy person today. Like, nobody says that. Nobody intentionally wakes up and says, I want to just eke by. But there's this way of living where we're thankful every day, and that helps us to be more generous. And being more generous helps us to be more grateful.
It does. There is a reciprocity there between the two, but both really make us feel better.
Yeah.
That's kind of the basis for both. Both generosity, both gratitude, they make us feel better. And so naturally, when we do one, we are more inclined to do the other. And there is research out there that shows the psychological benefit of it in terms of reducing symptoms of depression, improving our physical health. And the reason from a generosity standpoint, is that it helps us to feel more connected to the thing that we're giving to.
Yeah.
If you think about any time that you've given to an organization, whether it's a church, a nonprofit, or what have you, you tend to feel more connected to it. You tend to care about it more. Yeah. And we like that feeling. It provides that dopamine rush inside of us, and that feels good. And then our brain's like, hey, let's do it again. That was awesome, right? Yeah. And we want to continue to do that way. And then fast forward however long, we're living in this space of feeling really gosh darn good about ourselves in a really positive way. What gets in the way of that oftentimes is fear.
Right.
And I know that the scripture talks a lot about fear and living in fear. And for at least couples, what I find is that if they can just get over that hump of fear, the fear of if we give in this way, if we give this much, right, then what's going to happen to the rest of our finances? If they can push through that, find a way to reasonably there, the other side, the grass really is greener.
Yeah.
There. I know that's not true for many other things. Yeah. The grass being greener on the other side. But the grass actually is greener on the side of generosity and, and gratitude.
Absolutely. If
we can step into that fear and allow ourselves to get there. But again, that requires us to be intentional.
Yeah. And for me, it's a big piece of trust. Do I trust God with my money? One of the greatest ironies, I think, in our culture is that on our money, it says, in God we trust, and yet we don't trust God with our money. right? Isn't that great?
I haven't made that connection.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, in God we trust, but we don't trust God with our money. And for me, it comes down to just making a step of trust. Like, Michelle and I haven't always been tithers in our marriage. Like, there were times where things were lean and we just couldn't get there. But as we've moved along, we've made intentional strides towards percentage giving. I recommend to everybody, pick a percentage. If it's 1%, if it's 2%, if it's 10%, if it's 50%. Like, I dream of someday down the road where we're giving so far beyond a tithe that, like, money just has no hold on us anymore. And the more we can do, the more we trust God. And the more we trust God, the more God shows up. And the more God shows that he is trustworthy. So I'd love to hear you talk about just trusting God with those things. I know you guys are big budgeters. I love that. But a budget really helps you to trust God with the portion that you give God.
Yeah, so from a language standpoint, I prefer to call it a spending plan.
Spending plan. Okay.
Because I'm a spender, right? Yeah, it feels
Note
better.
to self, we're going to work on our spending plan later.
Like, it just feels better. But more than that, it helps us, mostly me, like it helps us, to put that trust in where that money is going. But here's the thing about trust and about giving, actually, that from a research standpoint, it shows that it actually creates more of a sense of freedom. Not just financial freedom, but emotional and mental freedom. When we give, we free ourselves up. And I don't know all of the inner workings of the brain. My friend Kristen House probably does, more so than I do. But I don't know all of the inner workings and the parts of the brain as far as how that goes. But they show that there is a freeing aspect psychologically, mentally, emotionally to giving. Yeah. And so when it comes to trust, I think if we can trust not only in God, but that through trusting in God, it's going to create a greater sense of freedom for us that we probably didn't even know we could experience. I have felt that certainly when it comes to giving, and giving probably in amounts that, I know I'm a spender, but I've got my limits and boundaries too. And I remember from a story standpoint, Clayton had a cousin who tragically passed away in a car accident at 30. And so this was at a time when our budget was lean. We had 2 kids. I had just started my private practice, and things were lean. And it had to have been a God moment, because this is not my husband at all, but he said, I want to give $1,000 to my aunt. Her son, Ben, took care of her financially. And so when he passed, not only was it a tragedy for his family because of losing him, but it was also a tragedy for Ben's mom, Barb, Clayton's aunt, because from an income standpoint, she lost her income source.
Yeah.
And he came to me and he said, I want to give $1,000. Now, I was nervous about that. I was nervous. And even though I like shopping on Amazon, I knew $1,000, you talk about a percentage standpoint from a monthly income, that was a huge percentage of our monthly income. But when we did that, when we gave to her in that way, man, just the lightheartedness I think that we both felt and experienced was unlike anything that I had experienced, at least before. And I know for Clayton too, it was the start of let's give and let's give big, and let's figure out a way that we can do that. And one of the ways that we've continued to do that is quarterly sitting down and figuring out where are we giving, whether it's our church, whether it's our youth ministry, whether it's our kids now get a say. And so it's the Humane Society and things like
puppies,
puppies, right? And that's great, right? Yeah, freaking
it works on me every time.
Every single time, right? Yeah, and so I'm all for kids getting to have a say in where the family money should go to. But generally, I'm like, man, come on, we just gave to the puppies last quarter. Can we pick somewhere else to allocate that? But that freedom of just when we give, as I said before, that rush that we feel, it inclines us to want to continue to give, right? And the freedom that we've felt from that. Guess what? We gave $1,000 at a time when things were kind of tight. I don't miss it.
Yeah. I love it. Well, any final thoughts that you have for folks in terms of the way that we practice generosity, the power that money has on us? Anything you want to say to these folks before we kind of wrap up our time together?
I'm going to use it as an opportunity to self-promote, and I hope that's okay with you.
I shamelessly self-promote all the time.
Thank you. I really appreciate that very much. I actually came to realize this on Friday, that your congregation has two very special members here. In a very serendipitous moment, realized that I had a connection to. Yeah. Right? Dave and
Annette House.
Annette, yep. And so their daughter, Brittany, who you guys probably all know, yes, she has recently come to work for me. Yeah. And I didn't know that. She emailed me on Friday and said, hey, this is weird and kind of funny, and you're speaking at my home church on Sunday. And I was like, that is weird, because Brittany and I have never met in person, actually. I've met her parents before her, and that feels a little weird for me now.
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yes, very true. But in terms of like final words, what I would say is that if you as an individual, if you as a coupleship, if money is a topic that you don't feel great about, maybe you're not like in the depths or in like the pits, but you just don't feel great about your relationship with it. There's things about it that you feel like have a hold on you, or you'd like to maybe get to that place of experiencing freedom from a generosity place, but you're just not sure how to get there. There are financial therapists. There are financial counselors like Brittany, who do the work of helping individuals and couples get there. Something doesn't have to be wrong in order to seek out help. And that's one of the things that I talk about, like with therapy. Like it's okay to go to therapy even if like things are okay.
I can love Jesus and my therapist.
You can, yes. Yes, right.
And
once a week, actually.
The two actually really work well together.
They do work well together. And you can love us once a week, right?
Yeah.
Both. Like, it's okay. But I'm a big proponent on being proactive, and that comes from this place of being intentional. And so even if you just feel like things are okay, things are great, but I'd like to get to a better place with my money, with my giving, with just my relationship with it. One, you can call me. Yeah. Adam's got my contact information. But there are financial therapists out there. A quick googly search can generally direct you to resources, but I would encourage you to take that step. Take that step into learning more about yourself, about that relationship, so that you can experience less fear and more freedom.
Love it. Love it. Well, one of the things that we're doing to be intentional around here is we're encouraging everyone who calls Lawrenceville First home to fill out one of these cards and to bring these back with you next week. You can do it online. I know that some of you received these in the mail and some of you did not, because us and the post office have a little bit of a disagreement at the moment. But if you didn't receive one of these in the mail, go online, read the little note that I sent to all of you, pick one of these up in the back of the church, or fill it all out online. Next week, we're going to have a time of commitment together, and we want you to intentionally pray this week about how you're going to live well by attending worship, by being a part of a small group. You're going to live in love with God, and you're going to love others well through service inside and outside of the church, and you're going to give generously because it frees you up to live more fully in this world. It tells your heart where your treasure is, and it also tells your brain where your treasure is. I want to leave you with this last thought. Winston Churchill said this, that we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And so let's be givers. Let's live a full life. Let's live a wealthy life. Some of that begins with giving. And if we're a part of this church, it's incumbent upon us to continue to invest in this place so that more people can come to know God's goodness and God's grace in more ways.